I like the idea of Kwanzaa. I think Kwanzaa really solidifies December in particular as a month where we begin to bring the African family together, the Pan-African family together. We go into January, and when people do it right, the King Day celebration can be used in a similar vein. Then you move, of course, into February with Malcolm X's birthday and Black History Month, man. So I really just, these 3 months right here, when you do it right and strategically, can really lay the foundation for a lot of Pan-African diaspora building. One institution that we have in the city that I think people in the know, but maybe people in general don't know about, Afrocentricity International. So talk a little bit about what it is, how it relates to Afrocentricity as a concept offered by Molefi Asante. But right there, a little spot right there on Germantown Avenue. Like, what is it? What do y'all do there?
All right. So first and foremost, Brother Shomari, thank you for having me on the show today. So Afrocentricity International was founded back in 2011 by Dr. Molefi Asante and Dr. Omowale. The organization is founded or modeled after Marcus Garvey's UNIA. So we are an international Pan-African organization. And the work that we are about is bringing together the collective efforts of African people, no matter where we are on the globe, for the purposes of African liberation. Right. Mm-hmm. Today being the third day of Kwanzaa, Ujima, we talk about collective work and responsibility. So our ancestor Walter Rodney tells us that we all need to be take responsibility for learning about this system that currently oppresses us, and we all need to do our part in working to overthrow it. So at Afrocentricity International, we do that in various ways. We have 4 tenets of our organization, right? We work across the areas of politics, intellectualism, economics, and spirituality. Spirituality is perhaps the most important because when you understand the history of movements in the diaspora or even movements on the African continent, a significant aspect of African spiritual or African character reformation has always played a significant role in successful movements, that we've erected.
Let's throw that part a little bit right there. I have a brother, I've had him on the show, he's always in my ear, that talks about African spiritual systems and African spirit in particular and how important it is. Conversely, a lot of times in our liberation struggles, people are intentional about leaving African spirit out of the conversation. They want to make it about economics, they want to make it about socialism. And as we talked earlier with this idea of Marxism and seeing religion as the opiate of the people. But you can't really organize and deal with African people without dealing with spirit. What do you all mean, number one, by spiritualism? Because I think that interesting, at the AHCP presentation 2 weeks ago, that very question came up. We were doing a presentation about African spirit. And one of the elders in the room was like, okay, let's define what we mean when we say spirit. So what does spirit and spiritualism mean? And why does AI feel that that's important as a pillar to address when so many of us talk about leaving our religion, leaving the spirit in the closet because it's a means of division?
Wow, that's a very good question, right? I guess when we talk about spirit, right, even if you look at the etymology of the word spirit, right, that word, I don't know if it's spirit or whatever it is, basically means like, you hear the word like respiration, so like to breathe, right? Like breathing is central to all that we do. That's why you see in many of, whether it's Kemetic yoga or even the Eastern practices, that breathing or being oneness with all around you, being one with the cosmos. But when we're talking about spirituality, we're talking about that component that makes us all one as African people. There's a brother over in the UK right now, brother Dylan, I believe is his name. He and his wife created the documentary Ancestral Voices. Okay. And they have a really unique project going on right now. What they're trying to do is develop 5 tenets that we have in common against the different, African spiritual practices. So whether it be, ancestral veneration, libations, sacrifice. He came up with 5, I believe. But for us, spirituality is central to the work that we do at Afrocentricity International, because we have a fundamental belief that African society will not see a renaissance, or it will not be revitalized without a return to African spirituality. And if you study the history of why our spiritual traditions have been denigrated, Specifically, if you look here in America, it was done as a matter of national security.
Right.
And you look back to 1890 with like the Mohawk conference, they state very explicitly that the majority of Africans in America are practicing some type of African spirituality, and we need to do away with this practice as a matter of our safety. Right, when you look back to the religious instruction of the Negro from 1804 to 1863, they also explicitly state that we need to do away with African spirituality as a way of shoring up this American project or this Western white supremacist project. So these things are core to our renaissance as a people, to our revitalization or restoration as a people, and we won't get there without a return to that.
Right. This is a big conversation. I'm putting you on the spot. We're not going to do justice to it today, but again, I'm throwing out another one. I threw out one of my premises earlier, and open up some conversation. We'll explore later. Here's the second premise I have about spirituality. I believe that we need to return, but in the spirit of spirit, I also believe that we need to create. That this idea that we have to really embrace again, that the idea of culture, like the idea of spirit, is living. And so we study culture and we study spiritual systems, but I also believe that it's context specific. The values don't change, but our context has changed in such a way that we have to figure out how the old way speaks into a new way, but we have to craft a new way based on the old way, not just relive the old way. And a lot of people who are traditionalists, they ain't feeling what I just said. But I'm wondering, as you all explore spiritualism from AI's perspective, what's the push-pull? There's one thing to go back and become Yoruba again, or go back and become practice voodoo. So it's one thing to do that, and I believe that we have to know that and stand on that. But I also believe that those versions or iterations of African spiritual systems as we became a part of the diaspora for the Ma'afa, as Haiti recreated voodoo for the condition to overthrow and to engage in rebellion. Like, we have to think about how do we recraft this thing for our current condition, not just go back and do it the way it was done 1,000 years ago. I'm just wondering where you all are.
No, I mean, I agree with you 100%. Whenever we're dealing with African spirituality, it's always a process of re-education, re-socialization, and recreation. For instance, if we look at the way Ifa, for example, has transformed here in the diaspora, the beautiful thing about our traditions is they are life-affirming traditions, right? So they transform and become whatever they need to become, or whatever we need them to become, in order for our survival. So whether it's Lukumi in Puerto Rico, or Condomble in Brazil, or voodoo down in Haiti, or even voodoo as practiced in New Orleans, these traditions emerged or transformed to maintain our strength, to maintain our sense of unity and purpose as a people, but also to give us the camaraderie needed to fight back against this oppressive system, this oppressive reality. And you mentioned Haiti, right? How we used voodoo during the African Revolution that created the nation of Haiti, how that was used and central to that fight. That's why, I appreciate the conversation that you and your brother, is it Egbo?
Oh, Obi.
Okay, brother Obi. I heard from he was recently on the Rock Newman show, and he gave a beautiful poem on African languages, but talking when he was being critical, I guess, of Marxist-Leninists and their denigration of spirituality or religion. So for us, I like to give examples, right, whenever I'm talking about African spirituality, and specifically how it's been denigrated over time and how we need to give it back its sacredness, right? So when our people hear terms like voodoo or zombie or mumbo jumbo, right? These are all terms that have been denigrated, right? The term voodoo is a fond word that means the spirit is with you, right? So Mama Baina Bello would say, in all things that you do, know that the spirit is with you.
I should be having her term soon, I'm hoping.
I look forward to hearing.
She reached out to me by way of email. I just need to get back and circle that. That's one of my mandatory. I got to make happen.
100%. Yeah. The term zombie comes from a West African word, nsambi, which means spirit. Again, this is a word that's spiritual in its essence. But when we think of zombies, we think of people who are dead, but zombie is actually the opposite of death. It actually means life. Mumbo jumbo, a word that we hear every day in American culture, which means someone is talking like nonsense or jibber jabber, right? But the reality is, mumbo jumbo comes from it's a bastardization of a West African deity, right? So a significant amount of re-education needs to occur, and that's the work that we're looking to do at Afrocentricity International through this new project and fund that we launched, the African Heritage and Cultural Preservation Fund.
And I want you to talk a little bit more about that, but one of the things I say to people, this is my third thing I'm throwing out there, people consider it controversial, but it's just, if you do your work, it's just simple. You can't talk about African military science and not talk about African spiritualism. The two go together. You can't understand African agricultural science and not understand African martial science, and therefore understand African spiritualism. That when you talk about African revolution, be it here, anywhere, you're really talking about farmers and people who were tilling land and turn those weapons through their knowledge of spirit into the weapons of their liberation. That's our story. So that when you're talking about the condemnation of our spiritual culture, you're talking about it from a military science perspective. That Zumbi, and I teach this on the show all the time, go back and look at the word. Zumbi is, like you said, it was created to vilify the idea of the zombie, but it was created to also denigrate the name Zumbi de Camares, right? So the name actually, go look at Wikipedia. It was crafted to turn what was a maroon, a revolutionary spirit, and its icon into something now that is, those dead people. But they're scared of those dead people because when you go back and look at Pat Robertson, what white supremacy tells itself is that those Haitians were possessed by the devil and turned into zombies, which is how they were able to defeat us. There's no other way you could explain a bunch of people with no shoes, no guns, no cannons, beating the most coordinated white supremacy army in existence at his time. Napoleon, Poland, France, he called in all the allies, and they still got their butts kicked by people who didn't even have guns. And so you gotta understand spirit if you want to understand that fight and how we were able to win that fight. So you can't separate the two. And this culture relies on the denigration and our sacrificing of our own culture back to them, running away, avoiding our own cultural center in order for them to defeat us.
No, I agree. I agree with you 100%. I think that when we embrace an African worldview, it fundamentally changes our paradigm in terms of certain concepts. For instance, like concept of life, or even the concept of death. African people, the notion of death for us, it's a notion of transformation, right? So when you understand that each of us is an ancestor returned, and that the cycle of life and transformation will continue to occur, then you don't necessarily have a fear of death, so to speak, right? So that it removes that barrier from you. But also, when you embrace an African worldview, you're not just embracing yourself or your life as an African person, you're embracing all life on the planet, right? Because you understand life in and of itself becomes sacred. So the fact that there's a paradigm in place right now that is anti-life,
right.
There's a paradigm that is killing our water,
right.
There's a paradigm that's killing our food supply.
Nature.
It's killing everything.
Sex.
Exactly.
Really?
So it becomes incumbent upon you as an African person to understand that paradigm, how it exists, and fight to overthrow it no matter where it raises its head. So I think that, that's what we have to be about as African people, Afrocentric or African-centered people.
When we come back from commercial break, you talked about a project that AI is undertaking. So I want you to give some time to talk about that project and how people can support that project if they so choose. I'm in the studio with Brother Omowale, Africa. Before we go to commercial break, I want to work one last caller in. So let's go to line one. Brother Oliver, is this you? Oliver, how you doing? What's up, home slice? Thank you. Ujima. Oh, wow, yes. Thank you for resurrecting that name. I appreciate that, yes. Yep. Bring your dimension, Brother Oliver. Uh-huh. Yep. Mm-hmm. You know, we built a lot of countries. Okay, I just want to be clear. And I know you worry about here in America, but I'm trying to extend your logic. See, the logic that you're offering breaks down. We build and can claim building a lot of countries all across this globe. And so if we all say, hey, we built this country, so we're going to stay here, and this is the center of how I'm looking at the world, I am saying that we lose the essence of what it means to be Pan-African. I understand your perspective, but I'm always challenged by with you, Brother Oliver, is why do you wait until we're talking about Pan-Africanism to always interject this into that conversation? It's almost antagonistic to me. And it minimizes, and I take it personally in some ways, because it's like you're trying to be contrary to the very agenda that you know I'm setting out to do. It's not like, you know, I just don't understand why the need to every time we have a diasporic Pan-African conversation, I can rely on the fact that you're going to call up and try to be contrary to the spirit of that. And I want you to look in the mirror and figure out where that comes from for you, my elder. I'm Eric Keith Grimes, Brother Shomari. This is the Shomari Show. We'll talk to you after these messages. Yeah. And welcome back. I'm gonna jump right back to Brother Omowale, Africa. Let's talk about the concept of AI, which you all are trying to build there.
Yeah, so we launched a very significant project back 25th of November. The project that we launched is called the African Heritage and Cultural Preservation Fund. You can actually check it out on our website. It's reclaimyourheritage.fund. Once again, it's reclaimyourheritage.fund. But the purpose of this particular project, what our goal is to basically create African institutes all across the African continent and all throughout the diaspora that serve the specific purpose of preserving and promoting African culture and specifically African spirituality. Right, when we look to the African continent right now, we know China has built 48 Confucius institutes.
Now you say we know, we don't know.
Okay,
so inform us about these realities.
So for our people who may not know or may be unaware of the influence that China is exercising across the African continent, to this date they have built 48 Confucius institutes all over the African continent. So China has actually funded it and constructed it, and the purpose of these institutes are to promote Chinese culture and language for the purposes of expanding Chinese influence. We know that China has given money to build the African Union. They've given a $32 million grant to build the headquarters for the Economic Community of West African States. I mean, just throughout Africa, the new museum in Senegal, China has funded that. China recently took control over the airport down, is it in Zambia, I believe, or Namibia? But that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying that on the African continent right now, everyone is exercising their political, their economic, and their cultural influence. There are no institutes that currently serve to preserve African spirituality, to promote African culture, and to ensure that African people will have a say in our future. Right, so Afrocentricity International has decided to build such institutes across the continent. These are grassroots, these are self-funded, so we launched a fund to help finance these institutions. We actually purchased land last year in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. On that land, we've already erected three buildings so far. But the complete goal for this first site is to have a full institute that really serves as an economic, a spiritual, and a cultural center for the local community. And the ultimate goal for this community is for it to be self-sustaining economically. And it's important that our communities be economically self-sufficient, because we understand that by studying history, that it is through economic subversion or coercion is how they get us off of our own terms.
Right.
For example, if we look to Haiti, I always give Haiti as an example, but I guess we can give anywhere in the diaspora, even on the African continent. In order to gain access to life-sustaining resources, they're either going to come by way of outside governments via NGOs, or they're going to come by way of outside private organizations, i.e. the Catholic Church.
Altruistic white colonialism.
Exactly.
It's called.
Now, in order for our people to access those resources, if you want to go through the Catholic Church, one of the caveats may be that you have to abandon your religion or your culture. You may have to embrace Catholicism to get access to those resources. Now, the resources that come, that are connected to more secular institutions like U.S.-based aid, there's other caveats. Like, for instance, on the African continent, one of the requirements is that your government be willing to promote homosexuality. Your government be willing to support efforts to, maintain some type of check and balance over the population growth, right? So what we're saying is we need self-sustaining efforts, right? Because we don't want to take aid from someone that forces us to decrease our population, or forces us to embrace foreign ideology, or forces us to abandon our ancestors and our culture.
That's aid, by the way.
That's not aid at all. So that's the purpose of the African Heritage and Cultural Preservation Fund. We launched it on the 25th of November. Right now we are in the middle or at the beginning of a 100-day campaign. In this campaign, we're trying to get 1,000 people to make a symbolic contribution of $100 within the first 100 days. But you can feel free to give as little or as much as you would like. You can even make recurring contributions. Once again, the website is www.reclaimyourheritage.fund. That's .fund, F-U-N-D.
And again, this is coordinated through Afrocentricity International, which is housed at the Molefi Kete Asante Institute. So if people want more information, I'm sure they could drop by, but also again, give that how they reach out, email, phone number, website again.
Well, if you go to the website, there's a Get in Touch tab where you can just drop us a note. But if you're local here in Philadelphia, we meet at the Molefi Kete Asante Institute every first and third Sunday at 2:30 p.m. We also have a meeting every last Sunday of the month that's a bit more spiritual in nature. So this Sunday we'll be meeting, it's called the Circle of Life, and we know that it'll be Nia, right? That'll be the Kwanzaa principle for that day. So we invite the community to come out and celebrate and build with us, and just help us build and create community, and to support the efforts of the organization to bring about African liberation.
We got a couple callers weighing in. We got a little bit of time, so let's close out the couple calls. Let's go to line, I don't know what line it is, but Wasset, line 2. Greetings, good afternoon. Hey, brother Wasset, how are you?
I usually just listen. I apologize for calling at the last minute, but this was something that the last caller that just kind of struck a nerve. Talking about how they view us as new people. I've been to Mali once, I've been to the Senegal twice, and I've been to the Gambia. And each time that I've been there, they've never looked at me as new. The conversations that I had have been very political. And one of the things that I have been able to ascertain very easily is how similar our struggle was. And they looked at me as a brother. I mean, I never forget, I was in the marketplace, and I'm building with this brother. We've never even seen each other. And he's telling me, my brother, don't worry, we're going to be back on the top.
Right.
He's telling me, talking about what we're going to do to the enemy, what we need to do to be together.
And it comes down to consciousness, my brother. I was just saying, just like here, right? We got a lot of black people here, but we have different consciousness. That consciousness is the same wherever you go. You can go to Jamaica and find people who want to be English. And you can build with some people who are down on, we all, like you just said, we're on the same path, how we going to come together, how we going. It depends on the consciousness. So I just think all of us got to be careful when we say they we, what we mean, people have different consciousness. And that's why I was saying with Brother OB earlier, we got to figure out how do we identify and build the apparatus across constituents of like mind within the diaspora that we're trying to create. But this idea that they say we the new people, that's just false. It goes against the whole legacy of people like Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey. How do you raise their names and say that you walk in their path, but then everything you say undermines the very spirit of what they were working for? That's the problem I have every time we have a diaspora conversation and I have to do battle with Brother Oliver. He goes out of his way to interject that mess, but then acts like he's speaking in the spirit of Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey. That's bullcrap. Thank you. Let's go to, I think this says Tyrone. Tyrone? Hi, how you doing, sir? Uji Mabargan. I appreciate you for coming out last night, Baba. That's right. Well, I thank you and I appreciate your call. I appreciate your support as always. Peace and blessings to you as well. And again, reminder to everybody, West Philadelphia High School this evening, doors open 5 o'clock, program from 6 to 9, Dr. Omowale, Kalinga, sponsored by the Kwanzaa Cooperative. Be there if you want to continue this spirit, this conversation of our need to reconnect, return, and I call it resurrect. We got to resurrect the African spirit. First of all, we got to become aware that we have an African spirit, that it is different. It is different in many ways than what we're accepting as the normal governing paradigms that are destroying the world. And when we return to our source, that means we also have to return to ourself. That means we also have to return to our spirit. So in that vein, give our listening audience again the ways that they can check in to reclaim your spirit, reclaim yourself, reclaim Africa, the fun that you all are doing throughout the Afrocentricity International.
Yeah, definitely visit. Can they hear me? Yeah, definitely visit our website at www.reclaimyourheritage.fund. Once again, the website is www.reclaimyourheritage.fund. If you're local in the Philadelphia area, we meet as an organization, Afrocentricity International, every first and third Sunday at 2:30 p.m. The address is 5535 Germantown Avenue. In addition to our first and third Sunday meetings, we meet every last Sunday of the month for a sacred circle, a circle of life. So we welcome you all to come.
What time is that?
It's this Sunday at 2:30 p.m.
All right, and that is Brother Omowale, Africa, and I thank you all for all your contribution to our conversation today on the Shomari Show, our Dynamics of the African Diaspora segment. We'll talk with you next week when we focus on food sovereignty and security, joined by my brother Malik Yakini. Stay tuned.